A tankette is a tracked armored fighting vehicle that resembles a small tank, roughly the size of a car. It is mainly intended for light infantry support and scouting. Colloquially, it may also simply mean a small tank. Several countries built tankettes between the 1920s and 1940s, and some saw limited combat in the early phases of World War II. The vulnerability of the light armor, however, eventually led armies to abandon the concept. Characteristics: tankettes were made both in one- and two-man models. Some were so low that the occupant had to lie prone. Some models were not equipped with turrets, or just a very simple one that was traversed by handling. They were significantly smaller than light tanks and did not have a tank gun. Instead, the main weapon tended to be one or two machine guns or, rarely, a 20mm gun grenade launcher. History: the genesis of the tankette concept was the armored warfare of World War I. On the Western Front in the later stage of the war, Allied tanks could break through the enemy trench lines, but the infantry following the tanks were easily stopped or delayed by small arms fire and artillery. The breakthrough tanks were then isolated and destroyed, and reinforcements plugged the hole in the trench line. The tankette was originally conceived in the early interwar period to solve this problem. The first designs were a sort of mobile, one-man machine gun nest protected against small arms fire and shell fragments. This idea was abandoned, and the two-man model, mainly intended for reconnaissance, was produced instead. The moving up of infantry while protecting them was solved with the armored personnel carrier. In 1925, British tank pioneer Gifford Locane Martel built a one-man tank, the Morris Martel, in his garage and showed it to the War Office, who agreed to production of a few for testing. The publicity caused John Carden and Vivian Lloyd to produce their own. Both types were developed further, but the two-man Carden-Lloyd tankette was considered the classic and most successful design, with many other tankettes modeled after it. While the design was influential, few Carden-Lloyd tankettes saw combat, other than those the Bolivian side used during the Chaco War. However, the design did lead to the Universal Carrier, which had an extensive operational history in the Second World War. The Italian Royal Army equipped 3 armored divisions and 3 fast divisions with L3 33rds and L3 35ths tankettes. The L3s were used in large numbers during the Italian invasion of Ethiopia, the Spanish Civil War, and almost every place Italian soldiers fought during World War II. Some L3s went with the Italian Expeditionary Corps in Russia as late as Operation Barbarossa. The French armored reconnaissance type of the 1930s was essentially a tankette in form, specifically intended for scouting ahead of the main force. In 1935, the Soviets experimented with transporting T-27s by air, suspending one under the fuselage of a Tupolev DB-3 bomber. The Imperial Japanese Army became one of the most prolific users of tankettes, producing a number of designs intended for jungle warfare. However, by the time of the Second World War, many were already obsolete or had proven unsuccessful in their appointed task. Many were relegated to tractor duties for artillery and logistics units. Due to the limited utility and vulnerability to anti-tank weapons, the tankette concept was abandoned, and the role largely taken over by armored cars. However, in Vietnam, the U.S. Marines employed the similar, somewhat larger, M50 Ontos with some success. The 1990s saw the renaissance of a similar concept in the German Weasel, introduced to provide airborne troops with armored reconnaissance capability. While these are called armored weapons carriers, they fit the definition of a tankette. Examples: British Carden-Lloyd, Italian L3 33rds and L3 35ths. Japanese Type 92 JYU Sokosha, Type 94 Tankette, and Type 97 Tankette. Polish TKS TK3, Czechoslovak RIV, Tansik VZ 33, Soviet T27, ASU 57, France Renault UE Schneele, German Weasel 1 and Weasel 2, American Marmon Harrington CTLS. Although they aren't officially designated tankettes, some variants resemble them.